Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming today, and as always, we're going to be talking about Harlequins, specifically how they stack up against Drukhari in Pariah Nexus. Now, Drukhari has found itself on the podium quite a number of times recently. They are not by any means the absolute best army out there, but they are finding themselves in the winner's circle. And I played a game recently against Drukhari and found there are so many similarities. It was the closest thing that I had played to a mirror match in a very, very long time. And the point of this video is to really help inspire those of you who've been struggling with Harlequins and maybe motivate you to bring them back on the table, because I truly believe if people are finding success with Drukhari in the Sky Splinter Assault, that there is no reason why we can't do the same in Harlequins themselves. So let's talk about some of the similarities. Drukhari has a ton of strengths, but they operate very similarly to the way we like to play our Harlequins. They are an MSU style army. They are highly mobile. They have pretty decent battle line. They can re-embark into their transports after the fight phase, just like we can with our Star Weavers. But they can also use it to get back into raiders with use of a stratagem. Disembarking from a transport gives their units ignores cover and lance, and they also get the added benefit of some extra rerolls to hit through use of power from pain. Now, while it's not an exact mirror, we can mimic a lot of the success in Harlequins that we see in the Sky Splinter Assault, but with the added benefit of all of the Eldari stratagems, the reroll to hit, the reroll to wound, and fate dice each turn. I believe that Harlequins could be just as good, if not better, than the Sky Splinter Assault Force. We are getting a reroll to hit and one wound on each unit. Our ballistic skill tends to be a little bit better. We have access to the fate dice. We also have access to Phantasm, fallback, shoot, and charge. We have grenades on most of our units. We have multi-phase damage. What you're going to see with Drukhari is that they have a lot of specialized units that are good at one thing, but as we know, as Harlequin players, we can do things in every phase of the game. We are also an MSU style army. We have good battle line. We have access to an abundance of devastating wounds. And most importantly, we have a lot of fights first options. Now, some of the first units we want to cover are not mirrors of each other. They are not similar to each other, but what they offer the armies is crucial, and it's what really allows balance from both parties. So the Troop Master at 55 points is an absolute must in Harlequins. One, it gives all of our troop battle line, but two, he gives our units the ability to punch up into any target. For 55 points, he's giving our Harlequin troop dev wounds. He also has grenades, he has Melta, and he's very, very versatile. Now, the Archon is a phenomenal character. He gives rerolls to wound to his units when they're using power from pain. He has good anti-infantry combat at 3+, 5 attacks, 2 damage each, and he increases enemy stratagem cost when he's the Warlord. Now, on the whole, I believe the Archon would do more damage into infantry than a Troop Master, model for model. But overall, throughout the game, I believe the Troop Master is a good bit more flexible. It allows him to punch up into vehicles, becoming a threat by himself as just a 55-point model. Throwing grenades, using fusion. You can flip a fate dice to get a guaranteed hit or wound, and we can be doing anywhere from 4 to 11 damage at most on a vehicle from just the Troop Master by himself. The Archon will not do that hitting into vehicles or monsters. So I do believe that model for model, the Troop Master to be the better option if you had to run a solo character. But the Archon's abilities himself makes our next unit so much better than they could have ever imagined. Leading me to two of the units that are at the forefront of each of these armies. One being the Harlequin troop, the other being Incubi. They both cost 75 points, but there's a few differences. Now, on average, Incubi are going to do substantially more damage to something like a typical Space Marine profile. They're getting 3 attacks apiece. They are at strength 4, -2 AP with 2 damage. When they're getting out of a vehicle, they're getting +1 to wound and an extra AP if they're using, power from pain, and they can re-roll their hits. Now, the troop are not 2 damage fighters, but they are getting devastating wounds with the Troop Master. They have a better save at 4+ invulnerable as opposed to the Incubi at a 5+ invulnerable, and they have access to fusion pistols and grenades. So the troop are not going to do as much damage in combat as something like a unit of Incubi, but over 2 phases, shooting and combat, they're going to be just as capable at eliminating a number of equivalent units on the opponent's side. Now, the most easy comparison we have would be between the Starweaver and the Venom. These are basically the same units. The difference being the Starweaver has a 4+ invulnerable, while the Venom has a 6+, but it has stealth, making them pretty close to the same reliability. I give the edge to the Starweaver in that avenue. Now, the Starweaver does cost 10 points more than the Venom, but it does give you 2 Shuriken cannons as well. The Venom is giving you 2 Splinter cannons. While the Splinter cannons are great into infantry, wounding on 3+, -1 AP, 2 damage, the Shuriken cannons can punch up a little bit into vehicles. While they're not great at it, wounding on 5s is much better than wounding on 6s, and both of these units allow our either troops or Drukhari infantry to get back in them at the end of the fight phase. These 2 units are incredibly similar, and you will not see a Drukhari list without a couple Venoms at least. Now, 2 units that function very similarly, fill the same style of role, but is maybe not so obvious of a comparison, would be the Skyweavers and the Scourges. They both have the ability to become a good anti-vehicle profile with access to Haywire. In the Scourges department, they can also gain Dark Lances. The major difference being that Scourges hit on ballistic skill 4+. Now, even with power from pain, it is limited the amount of times that you're going to be able to use these in a game, but even with the full rerolls to hit, because they are not getting an extra reroll to wound, the damage ends up being very similar between them, both averaging about 6 to 9 wounds with Haywire. So it's a little shocking. I know it doesn't seem that beneficial, but the added bonus of Skyweavers being 15 points cheaper, a little bit more durable, having that 4+ invulnerable save, and also access to Zephyr Glaives to get into combat at 5 -1, 2 damage each, a little bit of extra OC over a typical model. Now, full squad for full squad, the Scourges will have more OC, but we can also gain the Star Bolus. So on average, the Skyweavers are going to be able to take down just as much in the vehicle department as the Scourges, unless they spike, but can contribute to the game in other meaningful ways afterwards. Now, Scourges are a phenomenal unit, mainly because they get to move, shoot, and then move again, keep themselves safe. Now, in Harlequins, we utilize our Skyweavers a lot to screen, to take up space, to push something onto an objective, and hold our opponents back afterwards, while Scourges just have an opportunity to continually fight and shoot throughout the game. So they are different, but they both serve a very similar role and purpose. Now, earlier on in the video, I said that we don't have the exact same roles. We are not an exact mirror of each other, but as Eldari players or Harlequin players, we do have access to mimic some of the success that Drukhari players are getting into. And one of the ways that we do this is by utilizing the Falcon. Now, what the Falcon does is provides re-rolls to wound for any unit that it targets, for a unit disembarking from that transport that turn. What this does is it mimics the Archon's ability. Now, package for package, what we see a lot of times is a lot of Drukhari players will have a 10-man Incubi squad with an Archon inside of a Raider. That whole package costs about 305 points. Our unit of 5 troops with a troop master inside of a Falcon actually costs 270 points. And what is shocking at the end of this, if we go package for package, the Raider fires its shots, the Incubi charge, they attack, or the Falcon fires all of its shots, the troops fire their shots, they throw grenades, and they also have the combat added to it, we are doing very, very similar damage, with both of these units killing the exact same number of Terminator equivalent models, something with 3 wounds and a 4-up invulnerable save. They can also both take down a 10-man Marine equivalent squad. Now, the Incubi will do much better. They will kill far more than 10. I believe it's 14 or 15 Marines with their unit, but at some point, what does the overkill really matter? Okay, so the Falcon itself is the balancer. The Falcon is how we recreate the efficiency for the Archon, and we allow our troops to really start to punch up. Combine it with the fusion pistols, combine it with grenades, the pulse laser, and the shuriken cannon. We are doing some very, very good work for less points than the Drukhari army could do into a Raider. In the last game I played against Drukhari, it was awesome to see. We had a Harlequin troop getting out of a Falcon. They dropped a Raider with fusion pistols and grenades, then charged the Incubi unit and wiped the entire squad before anything else was needed afterwards. This was absolutely incredible. We had a 135 point unit of troops take down an almost, I believe, 225 point unit of Incubi. So they can get the job done. Harlequins are phenomenal into light infantry. So are Incubi. But point for point, I think we can make the case that Harlequins and a Falcon could be just as efficient as Incubi and a Raider, if not a little bit more, and have the ability to be a good bit more versatile afterwards. 2 more core units would be the Solitaire and Lilith. We see both of these in most armies. And to be honest, they are pretty much the exact same thing into toughness 5 or less or 2 wound infantry. Solitaire has the edge against vehicles and characters because it has precision and strength 6. It can punch up a little bit into vehicles, maybe deliver a finishing blow, while Lilith will have the edge against light infantry. Lilith can take down an entire unit of, termagants or whatever it may be, but the Solitaire himself is going to be able to dig into a few harder targets that aren't in the infantry style profile. So both of these function very, very similarly. Lilith is substantially less in points at 85, while the Solitaire is 115, but the Solitaire does gain lone up and the ability to be anywhere on the board whenever he wants to be, utilizing his blitz ability. So these 2 units are very close. They both have fights first. They offer the same amount of utility to each of their respective armies afterwards. Just another similarity between the 2 of them. So as far as the core portions of our armies and the action plans, Harlequins and Drukhari are very, very similar. But there are a few wild cards, and this is where we're going to start branching off into things that make each one of these different armies and factions unique. Eldari or Harlequins have access to more Anvil-style units. They have Yvraine and the Vizarch in that big Harlequin brick, which I absolutely love, giving fights first, regenerating models after they die, tons of fusion pistols, and devastating wounds coming out of that unit is absolutely incredible. It's great to bully the midboard. We have access to some good indirect fire with D cannons or even Night Spinners or Dark Reapers if you really wanted. They're not very Harlequin friendly, but the D cannons themselves I can see being a useful addition. We also have the Death Jester. There is not much in the Drukhari index right now that can mimic what the Death Jester does. So he is kind of that wild card there, another lone op, and we have access to something like the Avatar. If you wanted to play the Incarn or the Avatar, you absolutely could use that as an Advil unit as well. Into something specifically like Drukhari, it's a very good option because they do not have access to a ton of devastating wounds or grenades or things like that. The other similarities that we would see would be are typical vehicles. Vipers, Warwalkers, Void Weavers. Drukhari can fill that same role with Ravagers or Cabalites and Raiders, etc. The one things, two or three things that I think really set Drukhari apart is while they may not have the Anvil units, they do have access to the Beastmasters, the ability to scout across the board, move block your opponent, keep them in their deployment zone, screen, and all of that. The Beastmasters are incredible. So is the Void Raven Bomber right now. Just a ton of strength 8. I think it's -4 AP, 2 damage shots, and the Tantalus is pretty good as well. So they have quite a few other units that they can get into. The Court of the Archon is very, very good. Another fights first option for them to add to Lilith. But these are the things that are a little bit unique to each one of them, and depending on your play style or what models you have, may help you lean one direction or the other. If you like both of these, Harlequin and Drukhari, there's nothing that stops you from going the Ynnari route and adding a couple of each. So overall, I think there's a lot of positives and negatives to each side, but at the end of it, they both play best as MSU-style armies. They both play best with a very similar strategy. I think Drukhari are going to have slightly more trash units and scoring available by being able to break apart their units of witches and Cabalites. On average, the Drukhari lists that I'm seeing are somewhere between like 19 and maybe 23 different units, while our Harlequins are generally between like 16 and 19 a piece. So I do think they have the edge as far as it comes to scoring and secondaries. They have a lot of ability to deep strike their units wherever they want. They also have the edge in combat alone if Power from Pain is available. Incubi are a nightmare for most armies. They're very, very good. If that's all you can do is engage in combat, I think Drukhari, specifically the Incubi with the Archons, are going to have the edge. But they do have a lot more specialized units. The Scourges are great at shooting, but they're awful at combat. The Incubi are great at combat, but they have absolutely zero shooting. Same thing with, the Witches for the most part. So you really have to plan ahead and stage effectively to do well as Drukhari. But once you figure out the system, I think they are absolutely incredible. I think they can be pretty close to unmatched if there are someone like, faction specialists, and we see that very regularly. Now, Harlequins, on the other hand, seem to be a more well-rounded play style because we're not using an abundance of different units. We're not having to familiarize ourselves with a ton of different profiles. Everything is a troop or a Skyweaver or a Falcon or a Starweaver for the most part. It allows us to really gain a different level of consistency and efficiency in our play, which I believe will make Harlequins a little bit easier to play as a result. We do have substantially more movement tricks and durability. We have the fallback, shoot, and charge. We have -1 to hit, which I think is so underrated in Eldari, especially when we're utilizing things like 4+ invulns everywhere. We also have Phantasm and Fire and Fade. We don't have a ton of deep strike options, but it doesn't really matter because we can still position most of our units wherever we want them to be. We don't have, disembark from a vehicle in charge, but we can Phantasm a unit into a better position to move on our following turn, as long as it's a safe option as well to gain some extra movement. As well, I think that the Harlequins have a little bit more of a mid-board presence. If you're the type of player who likes to, contest the center objective, or you want that anvil to keep your opponent from just crashing into you with everything that they have, I think the Harlequins or Eldari were going to provide you a few better options than something like Drukhari. But at the end of the day, they are basically the same army. Unit for unit, damage for damage, package for package, ability for ability. We can recreate each other's successes in most avenues of the game. And as long as you're staging appropriately, as long as you understand your army's interactions and you're not just shoving everything forward, hoping for the best, you can get very similar results. Now, the first game I played against Drukhari the other day was a learning experience. I ended up winning, but it was a pretty close game. Knowing what it looks like now, knowing how I would play Drukhari, and how my opponent views the matchup as well, I think I can do a little bit better. I also think that my opponent feels the same thing about his list. So we did a whole bunch. I think there's a lot to learn from. But at the end of the day, when we're talking it through, we got a couple games in afterwards. We found that it's really about who commits first, right? Who gets a couple lucky rolls or unlucky rolls that will really determine the outcome between these two armies when matched player skill is involved. Now, I know this is a spicy take. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who believe that Harlequins clearly have to be inferior to Drukhari because otherwise we'd be seeing Harlequins on the board, but the math doesn't lie, the numbers don't lie. It's just about positioning yourself appropriately. Also, it's always fun to kind of spark some new conversation. I enjoy interacting with each and every one of you. I do not expect everyone out there to be in agreement on this. All I ask is that we all remain relatively, respectful and engage in a pretty good dialogue afterwards. I believe if Drukhari is finding success, Harlequins can as well. There are far too many of us out there with Harlequin armies on our shelves, just assuming that there's no way that they're going to find the level of success that they used to have. And I just believe that to be untrue. So I appreciate you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I will be starting a Discord. I will have the link in the description below. Feel free to join, ask away. We're going to have some sections for battle reports, all the different armies. I'd love to be able to interact with you all a little bit more frequently. So please like, share, subscribe. Any little bit that you can do helps more than you possibly could imagine. Thanks again.